Hi everyone, welcome back to Babylon Irons. So today we're going to break down what was an eventful, somewhat challenging, somewhat exciting, and probably quite a bit of relief of a summer window. Um, so yeah, before we kind of get into it, Sloth, what are your initial feelings now the window is done? Is it one of relief, one of excitement? What is it?
I think it's one of excitement. I think there is still, it wouldn't be West Ham if there wasn't still some worries there. I think we have done a really good job of upgrading the squad, and for a long time we have said about pace and physicality being some of the key things that we need, particularly in the Premier League. And we've done that really well with Mavropanos and Kudus, Alvarez as well. I do just think that there are certain areas we needed to improve. And one of those in particular is going forward. I know we'll go into that in more depth in a bit. But for me as well, I do think left back is I've not been particularly popular saying this, but I do think the way that Cresswell, just in my opinion, the way Cresswell behaved was completely unacceptable for a professional. It completely ruins his image at the club, in my opinion. I'd have looked to ship him out as soon as possible. And the fact that we didn't upgrade upon him, for me, is really worrying. Because I think he's easily upgradable. He had one sensational season for us. I think he's been good for long periods of his career here, and the last season or so he's been poor. That's just my opinion. You can disagree with it if you want, and you can tell me all the reasons I'm wrong. Most of West Ham Twitter does anyway, so it's feel free to join in. But I do think that we should have been looking for alternatives, and on the right hand side as well, someone like Johnson, who his future is very much up in the air. He reportedly wants first team wages, and in my opinion, he is very easily upgradable. Even if we just maybe gotten someone like Kyle Walker-Peters in, I know it would have cost maybe £20 million or so, but someone with this Prem proven experience and still plenty of years to play at the top would have really been ideal. So I do think that while there's a lot to be excited for, there's also areas to be trepidatious in. And if something happens to Soufal or Emerson, hopefully they don't pick up knocks, I think we will potentially be hindered. And it does kind of worry me slightly.
Yeah, we'll get into where we feel we maybe missed out as we go through. But before we get to that point, let's kind of cover off the outbounds. I think we all know one of those outbounds, it dragged on for probably longer than we would have liked. However, we did get the money we wanted. Some Arsenal fans didn't agree. Kate Drummond was one of our ones where we said Arsenal have been disrespectful. They were claiming that they hadn't. They were given a price. They were told it cost over 100 million. They have every right in which to try and get it cheaper. When you're told 100 million and your opening bid is 65, that's completely disrespectful, regardless of what the agents were telling them, which was that they probably accept 85. They're not the club. The club told you a price. You refused to pay that until Man City came in and put in a bid, or a fake bid, as Eni Aluko would say. They didn't come to West Ham with a serious intent in which to buy the player that they wanted. But we ended up seeing probably one that we expected to go in Lanzini on a free transfer. We obviously had the right in which to extend his contract, I believe, by at least 2 years, but we decided to let him go, and he's obviously now gone back to his home and spiritual home in River Plate. Nikola Vlasic had no intention and did not want to come back to West Ham. Again, not a player that I can blame him for having that attitude. Masuaku, again, has given us another player over the years who has given us some fantastic moments. However, it was time in which to move him on. One that probably left a bit of a bittersweet kind of thing for some fans. Obviously, others were very happy to see him go, and Scamacca as well. Happened to score 2 goals for Atalanta last night and missed out on a hat trick via VAR. So again, it's someone that I know, a known goal scorer that we've seen go. But when you kind of saw these other players, was there any ones that you kind of disagreed with? You wanted to stay? You felt that we maybe kind of jumped too soon, or were you by and large happy with these? Because these sales generated, I believe, in total, I'm just double checking, around about £129 million. Rice being about 100, Scamacca about 21, Vlasic around about 7-ish. And then obviously we had Masuaku, I think was around about 2 million or so. So actually probably just over 130 million. And obviously then Lanzini going on free. So what was your feelings with these being the players that were kind of go? Do you think it was the right choice? Do you think, what do you think?
Well, it would be disingenuous of me to say that I didn't like that. I don't want Rice at the football club. I think any West Ham fan out there would be lying through their teeth if they were saying they didn't want him to stay. Again, do I like Arsenal Football Club? Growing up, they were the best thing to watch. They had my favourite player in Thierry Henry. I've always got a soft spot for Arsenal. They have completely and utterly memified themselves over the past decade or so with Arsenal Fan TV, and that little gremlin in the headphones. I can't remember his name, but he makes me laugh. So
I think is it Tay?
Tay? Is that? Well, isn't that a song? Is that acceptable? Tay. That's a throwback there. I don't know. I just think he's chosen to move to a top club. Do I like Arteta? No, I've been very public about that. I don't like Arteta. I think he's a Primark version of Pep, and I don't like him at all. I don't like his attitude. But hey, it is an exciting project. They have got incredible facilities, and if a certain Spaniard is coming around your house and trying to woo you into his new squad, and you've got your best mate there in Saka, then I can understand him going. I do think that we were too late in potentially moving for a number of targets. I said many times that we missed a chance to really build a stronger midfield around Declan Rice and push forward with that. I think had we signed someone last summer, someone like Thuram, who wouldn't have broken the bank like he would have this season, to come in and rotate in the squad as a young player, I think we'd probably have been talking about a really positive Premier League season on top of a Conference League win. And then, hypothetically, can that allow you to ask more for Declan? All those things are ifs and buts and maybes. But I do think that we've done really well in replacing him so far. Not necessarily all the picks that I would have gone for, but I don't begrudge him a move. I think all this stuff, if you're wishing an injury on him, I think you need to give your head a wobble. And in terms of other players leaving, look, 3 of those players on there, they don't really make a difference to a squad. And as much as I love Lanzini and loved his time at the club, particularly at the start of it, let's not kid ourselves. The last 2 years, apart from that sensational goal against Spurs, it's been limited in terms of what he's brought, and that's not his fault. Part of that is down to the system we play, but also just his body. I think his body kind of changed, and the one that does kind of bit is Scamacca. I'm getting called out about my rose-tinted glasses on Scamacca in comparison to Cresswell. I think if you're comparing someone not turning up to training and not turning up to the dinner, the players' celebration of the Conference League win, in comparison to answering a few questions honestly in an interview, I think, again, you're probably very insecure and sad. So if you're watching this, you know who you are. And, you know, that's my feelings on the matter. I think, you know, someone like Di Canio never made any secrets about the clubs that he loved. And I don't want a world in which players just give robotic answers to questions. I like it. And I don't think he was disrespectful.
No, he kept saying he knows happy to stay, and if he does go, not because he's a failure, it's because there's other mitigating factors. And it was, I haven't got any qualms with what he said during his time.
I think it's the annoying thing for me is that there was clearly a player there, and one that I think would have worked in despite the system. You know, I think if we got Kudus and Bowen around him this year, that completely changes things. If we're throwing him on as opposed to Ings after 60 minutes against Luton Town, he's probably grabbing a couple.
Or at least the ball is sticking to his feet a lot more.
Yeah, and for me, it's not so much the fact that he's gone; it's the fact that we didn't replace him. And you know, how many times have we said this in the past few years with West Ham? The fact that we've let a striker leave and not replaced them when there were so many clear potential replacements, and you know, despite his fantastic start to the season, potential upgrades on Antonio as well, one of whom we've seen scoring and creating for fun in the Bundesliga in Boniface. You know, there are players out there who could have easily come in.
Back into the heart, that one.
Who could have easily come in and really pushed our attack forward.
Yeah.
Not necessarily demanding to come straight in, but just working their way into the side. And I think we really let ourselves down there. I know it's a short period of time until January, so I'm crossing my fingers that Antonio's hamstrings hold out until then, and he can keep up his current rate of scoring and his performances. But yeah, there's the little voice in the back of my head that's going, no, that hamstring. Did you hear his hamstring go there? And I kind of worry a little bit that where we discussed in the previous video about Mubama not getting minutes, the kind of blueprint that we were promised of him getting more time on the pitch and being this Antonio replacement long term is in doubt, just because, you know, if you can't throw him on against Luton Town, who do you expect him to throw? Who do you expect him to go in and prove himself at the Premier League level? It's a really, for me, it's just, I want him to get minutes. I want him to show us what he's got. And I really kind of don't get not playing him. So
on the upshot with Mubama, I guess you could argue that Harry Kane earned his stripes by playing in Europa competition. That then transpired into him then taking over the mantle from, I think it was Adebayor at the time at Spurs as the main man. So you could argue that Mubama's avenue into the West Ham squad and into the lineup is going to be via European competition and cup competitions, which many would argue, yes, that should be the place where he earns it. But again, I'm with you. I think if you rate him as highly as been said and you want him to be part of the team, you then have to be willing to play him. I don't see the point in having a player on the bench if you don't have the intention to bring said player on. So otherwise, it's just putting a bum in the seat. If you're literally have no intention to bring that player on, just go with five subs rather than 7 subs or 9 subs, I think, as it is now. Just go with the players you're willing to play. No point. But what we did see, I guess, is positive is we saw the likes of Fornals stayed. There was a lot of speculation about him going. Obviously, we still have issues around his contract. Cornet, whilst again not clearly part of Moyes' plans to stay, which again gives us that depth on that left side. It's that pace. So if he can get some minutes, probably again like Mubama is going to be in cups, it's a great asset to have. Can play either left or the right hand side, left wing back if needs be, and even left back at an absolute push as well. So we do have some players that we've kept that really do kind of allow us to have that level of depth. I do agree, probably could have done with one or two others leave for others to come in. However, we did what we did, but let's move on to the positive. Let's move on to the transfers again. As we both said, maybe not the players that we initially would have kind of called out. However, Alvarez and Dinos were both in our Babbling Irons list of players we should be looking at and targeting this summer. Kudus was not someone we anticipated because, again, didn't anticipate we look at a more attacking centre midfielder, although he play right wing. Ward Prowse is a player that myself and Sloth wholeheartedly hold hands up and say we didn't really want because of age, wage, and we just didn't really see how he's bringing the progression in terms of his kind of ball carrying, which is something I think we are going to miss over the course of the season. However, he's been an absolute revelation and long may that continue. I'm not going to go too overboard on him just yet because for me, I think I want to see what happens over the course of 10 games, but his start has been phenomenal. And that, that's great because I've always said I want to have, humble pie food in my face, that whole kind of thing when a player comes in. And I think that's when a player does well, they're doing well for West Ham, and 100% that's what I want to see. But
he hasn't even had any free kicks yet. So, Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. He hasn't actually had a direct free kick yet. So I think that when there is a direct free kick, I imagine there's going to be that Dimitri Payet kind of buzz around, a set piece, which is going to be, again, it's always fun to have that level of just, this is almost like a penalty, which was ridiculous. That was the thought process when Payet had a free kick. So it'd be nice to see that again. But in terms of those players, what do you feel that has done for the squad? Because I think we mentioned many times that whilst we didn't want Declan to go, him going could be the absolute making of West Ham. And we both went very hard on that. He is replaceable. Many don't like that idea, but statistically, he is replaceable. And we were very much adamant that it could be the making of West Ham. And it's actually quite exciting. And when I look at those players, I am quite excited about the prospect. I think one or two more that could have came in really could have taken those levels up a bit more. But what were your feelings on our summer dealings? You think we should have? First of all, what's your impression of those summer dealings that we've had so far? Then we'll go into where we think we maybe missed out.
I think just looking at those players on paper, you can't knock the business that we've done. It has been really good, solid additions, and I just mentioned about the pace and physicality of the players we've brought in. They've got that by the bucket load, Mavropanos as well. I did a thread on him a while back, and I kind of retweeted it because I thought, Stuttgart are my German team. Really, I love watching them, and they've always had a crop of players that I just enjoy watching. They're either, built like the proverbial outhouse, or they are hilariously quick. And in some rare instances, you get a mixture of both of them, and Mavropanos is one of them. He is absolutely rapid, incredibly strong in the air, but very comfortable on the ball, and he's got an absolute cannon of a foot on him as well.
I think he was clocked as the fastest player in the Bundesliga, I think last season or the year before, which is incredible because we're talking about Moussa Diaby plays in that league, and Mavropanos was clocked as the quickest player. It's just insane.
I think it was 2 seasons ago because because Diaby was clocked last season as the fastest, I think. But even then, we're talking it was really close between the two of them.
Yeah.
So I think when you also have a 6'4" frame, and I'd mentioned Zuma in the Luton clip, if that's running towards you, if you've got him running towards you at 6'4", that
he's
pace.
He's broader than Zuma as well. And Zuma is a big dude. And Mavropanos kind of dwarfs, I think, quite a few players. He's very much like, in terms of physicality, gives me that Dawson-esque feel because of very broad, very strong. And it's, like I say, that aggression to, there's the ball, I'm going to meet that ball.
The other thing as well that he brings is versatility. And he said in his interview with the club that he started life as a forward, and I think that's something to really remember for West Ham fans, is that he has that comfort on the ball. He can play centre mid, he can play defensive mid, he can play right back. So he is comfortable moving across the pitch, and he's one of those players I think West Ham fans will love, because like Alvarez, he will just throw himself into a challenge and he'll give 100% every game. So I think we've done a really good job there, as opposed to a certain Englishman, which you and I were both just pulling our hair out at the links with Maguire. I think we've pulled a blinder there. And in terms of the overall signings, I think neither of us would have anticipated that we would have gotten Kudus. It's one thing to be
at the time when it was with the link, but again, so was Lucas Paqueta last season. Yeah. It was just one of those ones that was, no, surely not. We're not gonna do this. And he seemed Brighton bound, and then Arsenal, and Chelsea, and so on.
Well, I think as soon as one of the things that interests me, and I don't mean this with any disrespect to Brighton, I've been many times to the club, and it's an incredibly well-run club. However, I think one thing that they have to now realise is that as soon as they're interested in a player, other clubs are going to be like, what's going on here? And they're going to look and watch the situation. And I think Brighton have got a fantastic business model in the fact that, the clearest reason that deal collapsed was they wanted a buyout clause. Kudus wanted a buyout clause. And Brighton, if anything, over the past few seasons have shown us that they're willing to hold on to their players and they're not going to be bullied. And I think, that's clearly their line. That's clearly no, we're not going to have this. We want to get maximum bang for buck for our players. And, all credit to them. They stuck to their guns and said, no, look, we're just going to walk away. So I think that then opens the floodgates for the teams around who are looking to push and, kind of play at the same level that Brighton have been, to put a deal in place and perhaps take the hit of a sell-on clause or something that Brighton may not be willing to do. And it's a sensational deal. He offers so much versatility, so much pace and power. And I think we mentioned the average age of the squad. This is a long-term option as well. It's not just a case of someone who is 28 and proven at the European level. This is someone young and proven as well, multiple seasons at the top. And I think that's the real difference that we both wanted to see in targets, players who are proven but young. And I really hope
Kudus, Alvarez, Dinos, all around the 23 to 26, I think is Ignace Alvarez. Even 25, I think he might be actually. Around that age, which is many would go, well, they're still young players. It's like, yes, but they are seasoned international players who have played European football as well. These are not your run-of-the-mill type of player, and I think we've done incredibly well to get those, and to get Dinos for as cheap as we did is fantastic business. Allows us extra flexibility. Obviously, the surprise package of this transfer window was the acquisition on deadline day of Alan Irving, which we were understanding was obviously a buy to loan, but it was also really a deal in which to facilitate an affiliation with a Bundesliga team, so a top tier Austrian team. I think they're actually third in the division currently, so they're having quite a good start as well. But how important do you think this deal is? Not necessarily in terms of player, because I don't think he's probably a player that we will maybe see at West Ham, but how important do you think that this type of deal is in which to make the club more professional, or I guess more modern in its approach to player recruitment and so on?
Well, I think this is one of the ways that modern football is changing so rapidly in terms of, the scouting systems and the recruitment systems aren't just that of sending a player out to Vienna and then they watch a game and they go, oh, I like this lad. It's getting a club set up that has your ethos. They might not necessarily play at your level, but they will play teams week in, week out, and they will be able to give you feedback, and they will say, oh, look, we played Salzburg, and as you know, Salzburg, top of the Austrian Bundesliga, and this is one to watch. Wow, this guy really blew us away. And it's changing the way that the club do business. I do think that
you think you can lean on their scouts as well, because there's going to be opportunities where, like a Højlund, for instance, he was bought from Danish league into the Austrian league. I think it was for Vienna, wasn't it, before he went to Atalanta? And it's those types of moments where they may now go, look, we don't have the funds. Now, as part of our affiliation, maybe we work a deal that gives you first refusal on said player. You give us some cash towards it, or as part of your affiliation, you give us a fee, kind of thing, that can help support us in the transfer market. And by doing that, we can go and start buying some of these young players that we think is going to be useful for us, but also could be maybe like the next Højlunds, the next Haaland, those types of players that are in a lesser league to them, but still a decent standard, like, Scandinavia, where it's a hotbed of talent, where they could go trying to cherry pick some of those players, to which then ultimately the view is you have first refusal. It's a great way to work, because if they have young players come through their youth system, we can benefit of that. We can send some of our young players. Also means that we can go into maybe markets we're not familiar with, like, for instance, maybe plucking one or two players out of African football, bringing them over and putting them into the Austrian league for 1 to 2 years to develop. It's things that we've seen Brighton do when they've been buying players from South America, put them, say, in the Belgian league, because they have an affiliation in Belgium. It's the way football's going, and it could be possibly one of the smartest things that we've done all summer, because of what the potential benefits are, especially if we set those affiliates up in other locations. But we'll maybe dig into that in another video. But kind of pulling it all back, the last two players that we brought in, or like we kind of haven't talked about, is obviously Ward-Prowse and Alvarez. How do you feel, or what's your impression of them two in the initial games that we've seen them?
Look, I don't know how many times I have to say it, really, because Ward-Prowse he's been fantastic for us when he came in, and I think our biggest worry was him being in a field next to Souček, and yes, potentially just the limiting factors that you have with that. I don't mean this with any disrespect to either James Ward-Prowse or Souček, but we discussed the limits of their games at great length last season, and I'm sure Souček was probably the more covered topic with a lot of fans. But I mean, the first couple of games, Souček was brilliant, and he was kind of back to the Souček that we saw in his first full season and that half season when he came in. Obviously not scoring the goals, but he was causing problems, and I think this notion that Declan Rice last season was holding us back is wrong. It's categorically wrong. However,
I think
it did change
for some players.
I don't think it did change how he played. It changed how we played. It changed how Souček played. And I think when you're talking about Souček, I've said it time and time again, he's a blunt instrument. But if you play that instrument well, he's going to get you a hell of a tune. And I think Yeah, it's and
What was with Fellaini, it's the same kind of argument, isn't it? It's a blunt instrument, but when used appropriately, that blunt instrument is exactly what you need. And we do criticise Souček, and I think it's mainly when we criticise, we're talking about his on-ball ability. Defensively, I don't think there's probably many better than him in our entire squad. I include some of our defenders in that. Personally, I think that for me could be the longevity, the long kind of push for him could be if West Ham wanted to keep him and he wanted to remain. My personal view is I think he could be a phenomenal centre back because defensively he's strong, good athleticism as well, absolute unit in the air and defends both areas. In some respects, you negate his inability or his lack of ability in possession. But however, being a midfielder who can play on the ball will also give him a better ability than most defenders. So it's one of those ones where you think that maybe if he was a few years younger, that idea could be used. I do think maybe this season might still be his last, even though he's got his new contract. I do think it's more protecting his value than him being valued. However, I think it's smart that we got him in a new deal. We said it at the start of the season. You either give him a new deal or you sell him. We didn't want to sell him, so we gave him a new deal. Can't critique that. And I think Alvarez coming in has clearly taken that spot. And like we said, Ward-Prowse is making us eat humble pie. Happily, we'll eat the humble pie. If he can continue over the next 10 to 15 games, then we're going to be in a great position because he's going to be chipping in with goals. He's going to be chipping in with assists. And that means we're going to be likely winning more games than we draw or even lose. And, the quicker we can get to that magic 40 mark, the better. If we can get to near there by January, I would be ecstatic.
I think one of the things you're going to see is potentially Souček used a lot more against the bigger sides that we play. And as you said, bringing that defensive element of his game, that strength at the back with Alvarez as well. I think I wouldn't put it past Moyes to just go, we're going to have Alvarez and, we're potentially going to look to drop an attacker. We're going to play wing backs. We're going to play 5 at the back.
I think it'd be kind of a 4-2-2-2 kind of formation. And you basically, Ward-Prowse and Paqueta will be asked to go wide. And then it's going to be Souček and Alvarez protecting that middle. Yeah, I can see and Bowen obviously up top with.
Exactly. And I think if you think about playing side like City, when you're going to have Doku running at you, you're going to have Alvarez, you're going to have Haaland, you're going to need to defend in a very different type of way. And let's face it, Doku is beating every single player for pace, really. And Haaland, if he's not beating you for pace, he's beating you for power. If he's not beating you for power, he's beating you in the air. It's one of those where
he's outmaneuvering you. It's just,
if you really want to try and beat City, I think potentially that's the best way to do it. Is just a kind of last bastion.
I think it was Hayden and I can't remember who it was, the other defensive midfielder. And Paqueta said we just couldn't find a way through because they basically had a back 4-5 and then they had 2 guys that literally did nothing but sit and screen. And they just couldn't find a way through. And ultimately, it's probably the only way you can beat City at this point is to just create an impenetrable force straight in that middle of your pitch and have a really strong kind of defence. It would be interesting if we went to a back 3 because I can imagine maybe Mavropanos being put in there because of his pace and power, maybe to try and match up with Haaland. And then obviously you've got Zuma and Agard sitting in there as well for, again, a little bit of pace and some good movement in defence. So I think the great thing is that we're talking about the options now we can have. We can change and go into multiple formations. I do think there are elements we missed out on, like you say, left back or left wing back. We've got Emerson, who's really playing well, but if he's injured, can we rely on Cresswell to bring the same? I don't think so. I think Soufal, as brilliant as he has been in the last probably 6 months or so, I think against Luton, what we did see is that he's starting to look a little bit more limited in going forward and in his and he's never been necessarily the best in taking on players. I think that we maybe need, because of the way we use Bowen, a fullback that is comfortable doing things on their own in that respect and can play that role. Obviously, Johnson is a concern. So again, right back is probably something we missed out on. And then you've got to look at, I do think midfield, we needed another midfielder. When you look at our reserve, we've got Fornals, obviously covers Paqueta. We then have Souček, arguably is going to cover Ward-Prowse or Alvarez, but then our other option is Connor Coventry. So you kind of go, well, you probably needed another one. Now, our player we wanted aspirationally was probably kind of a bit out there, but having said that, we have £18 million left over from what wasn't spent from the money generated. We arguably should have a transfer budget. Bringing in someone like Fofana should have been simple, really. Definitely need a centre forward because, as we're pointing out around about Danny Ings, we don't necessarily see him being able to offer enough difference or enough quality in which to really help us in games. And Mbama's not playing currently. Still worried about Bowen not having a legitimate replacement or kind of cover. Again, hope maybe Kadua is going to give him the chance. And the left-hand side, you again possibly needed an upgrade with one of those options there to leave as well. So there are some things that kind of go, what could have been had we spent all of the money we've spent all the money that we generated, and then say maybe 40, 50 million on top of that in terms of actual transfers. Do you feel that maybe he was a bit of a cop-out in why some of our movement didn't go and why we haven't exceeded? Or do you think it's maybe just being held back for January where we can maybe go again?
I think that's me being optimistic to say that January is going to be that time, because we know that Moyes doesn't particularly... He speaks about the difficulty of the window, but then again, he's made some really positive January signings. The club have made positive January signings, but then again, we've also made Danny Ings signings. So I think, I do think that when we have money to play with, it will potentially be something that we do look to explore. I can also see clubs coming in for Danny Ings if he scored a few goals off the bench at that point, and we go into January.
I can imagine someone like Luton would be interesting if they're in trouble
and struggling. Say Sheffield United, if they're struggling.
Another example, isn't it? There are teams. I think that the wage is the problem. We may have to do a Stuart Downing operation and pay part of his wages, but I think maybe paying 40% of his wages and him then being somewhere else is probably preferable.
Yeah, and I think that's the sort of thing we'll be looking to do in January. That if we can, win our group in Europe, and we're in a good place in January, we can really capitalize on the market. And I think that will probably be Tim and Moyes' goal, is to try and really push forward. And one of the big things that we've spoken about is the importance of that window, but also the impact it can have. And I think if the right decisions are made, if we can move players like Cresswell on, if we can move someone like Johnson on, but bring in quality on top of them, then as a whole, we are pushing forward. And if for any reason there's a chance we can bring in a player, say, of the level that Núñez was when we were looking at him, that's only going to have a positive impact. It can galvanize the squad. It can kick players on, and it can kick the side on. So I think Moyes will probably be really looking to use that market, because you look at how we did against Frankfurt and how much we were crying out for depth in that game, and
still pains me thinking about that game.
Yeah, but I think, imagine how Moyes is feeling. And he's probably still thinking, oh,
what could have been?
Really made, and if we can do that, we've got a great opportunity, but it's all ifs and buts. It's a big if at the moment. If we can keep this form, keep in a positive place, then January is going to be massive for us.
No, I completely agree.
It can take what, in my opinion, has been a 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10 window, and make it into a 10 out of 10.
Yeah. And I agree. I think, we're 7, literally touching an 8 out of 10 this window. I do think if we are to go again in January, I think there's 4 positions we're going to look at. Left back is one because of Cresswell on his only 6 months left. Centre back because Aged is going to be off at AFCON, so I think maybe a left side because maybe we're not going to look at Ogbonna. And obviously we need to look past Ogbonna potentially because he's only got 6 months left and we don't know what's going to happen maybe with Thilo. He may decide he wants to go. I do think we'll maybe look at another centre midfielder because of, as I said, that depth when you go past, say, Fornals and then you've got Souček and it's Coventry. I don't think that's necessarily what we need if we really want to keep pushing on. And then up top, again, I think Hugo Ekitike, if he is available come January, I do think we will maybe try and move again, maybe for a loan for 6 months and then a buy. I think that what we probably will try and do is a couple of smart loan deals with, potentials to buy. But yeah, you got to hope that there is some money in January, because if there is, and we're continuing in the vein we are, that could be investing maybe in 2 or 3 positions, could be the difference between, I don't know, qualifying for Europa League or Champions League via the league. It's big ask at the moment, but potential if we continue in the vein we are, or it can help us push forward in Europa League and maybe go a step further than what, say, Roma did, who won the conference, then got into the final the very next year in Europa League. Hopefully, that maybe gives us that extra push to do what they couldn't do, which is back-to-back European trophies. Again, all incredible big asks, but we have a fantastic team. If it has a couple of additional little flourishes maybe in January, I think it really could be exciting. And the thing that I like is that the players we bought all have, say, bar Ward-Prowse, but again, he's a seasoned international, European experience with Champions League, Europa League. They understand those competitions. They are seasoned internationals, and pace, power, technique is pretty much the catalyst for across all of those guys. And what's going to be really interesting is seeing how Kudus fits into our 11. I think he's probably going to play on that left-hand side with a free role, but I think he's probably the one that I'm most excited about. I'm loving Alvarez. I think, again, we picked him as one of our players to come in and sign and cover Declan Rice. I think that's amazing that we kind of got a pick. But yeah, I think Kudus is the one that excites me the most. What about you, Sloth? Does Ward-Prowse form excite you to maybe continue that on and maybe have, a Dimitri Payet level?
I really hope so. I think the one that excites me the most is probably Alvarez, to be honest. I like that sort of sentiment anyway. I like that tough tackling and, energetic player who just throws himself on the end of everything.
Old school West Ham, isn't it? Really is old school West Ham.
And I think he's just got all the makings of a fan favourite, but he's a top footballer as well. So for me, he's my favourite signing so far. I think for this season as well, he'll be vital, but of course he doesn't have anything like AFCON that he has to go to, and Kudus will be a big loss during that. I also think he has a lot of sway with other footballers. I mentioned Jimenez as someone that we were linked with, and he's scored 2 goals today for Feyenoord. Potentially someone we could go back in for in the January window, and will offer us a really, really good competition for Antonio.
Incredibly mobile, clinical. Yeah, he's really improved though since going to Feyenoord. Yeah, absolutely.
And he's what, 22 or so. I've been really impressed with him so far, and he is. We've seen that Agent Alvarez. He was very complimentary of the club towards Kudus, and one of the important factors in him joining as well. So I think for me, he's our signing of the season. And the fact that we beat Dortmund to him, I think is also a bit of a statement.
No, completely agree. But yeah, I think it's an exciting time. Me and Sloth both say 7, 8 out of 10 this window. I agree. I can only say it's ever a 10 if we win something. If we win something at the end of it, or say qualify for Champions League for the league, then I think I will concede it's an absolute 10 out of 10. It has the makings to be one of our best windows, and we have been the one fear that we had, which so far hasn't transpired, is that we have spent the Declan Rice money incredibly well and incredibly intelligently. And as much as it pains me to say it, credit has to go to Sullivan and Brady for the work that they did in getting the right money for Declan Rice. How they've allowed all of those funds to be available for other deals. I do think we could have done more as well. But credit where credit is due. They could have pocketed some of that money. We thought that they would. Pretty much the entire Declan Rice money and money generated from other players so far has been spent minus 18 million, which until January we've got to assume is going to be available. So, credit where it's due. They've done the club a solid off the back of winning a trophy. Again, I don't put that down to them. I put that down to Moyes and the team. But we have won a trophy under their stewardship, and we're in a good place to start the season, better than I think we probably ever thought we would be, with having 3 wins and a draw off of our first 4 games. If we can get a result against City as well, and a positive one, then maybe, just maybe, we can start to dream about being in a European competition for another year. I'm not going to quite start talking about a title race yet, but if we're there by Christmas, then I'm definitely going to be singing we're going to win the league as we have before under Big Sam, etc. Because quite frankly, what is football if you can't dream and have a bit of a laugh at the same time? But yes, Sloth, any final words?
Well, I'm not even letting those words come out my mouth yet. I think it's. I've seen West Ham capitulate far too often for that to be something.
We're not going to win the league, but I can at least.
Let's not even talk about it. I'm not letting my hopes get built up. But I just think that we mentioned the kind of building blocks that were in place, chance to progress, and I think this is exactly that kind of season for us. And I said countless times last season, I'd love Moyes to prove me wrong, and so far he has. So far he's really proven us wrong, and
he's getting results, and that's what we want, right?
Yeah. So, long may it continue. And I think if we can get something out of the City game, even if we don't and we play well, we can take a lot from that. And just making sure that we progress, making sure that we do travel, like we do get ourselves out the group stages in Europe. And if we can do that, I think next year could potentially be a really, really exciting time.
Yeah, completely agree. We're going to leave it there, guys. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I really appreciate it. As ever, please do please do subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And let's enjoy a nice international break without worrying about West Ham and being, bottom of the league. Let's enjoy the fact that we're towards the top end of the table, and we've had some real positive kind of end to a transfer window, positive start to the season. Europa League is going to be starting soon enough as well. So there's plenty to be excited about. Another European tour. We're champions of Europe, and third tier version, but champions still. But let's enjoy a nice little break from the Premier League and come back and hopefully get a result against Manchester City. But thanks everyone. See you again very soon. And Sloth, one last thing, and that is, as always, come on you Irons.
Come on you Irons.